What needs to be realized is what we're dealing with, and what we're dealing with is a world war. In fact, this is actually a very significant distinction. Ukrainian-Russian war, attack on Ukraine. Where is this war? On the periphery of Eastern Europe? Or is this a world war that, I argue, has been prepared for many years systematically? And this is a systemic war that will change the order on Earth. I want to highlight the main points. And this is indeed a systemic war that will change the order on Earth. And I want to highlight the main points. Let's just rewind this film a bit. Let's go back to the early 70s, in the decade of the 20th century, when the Club of Rome emerged, talking about the risk of global warming. And after the fall of the USSR in the early 1990s, it turned out that the broadcasting channels that were, in fact, broadcasting red propaganda were simply changed to green. And suddenly it turned out that this green propaganda about climate change became very important, very profitable for Russia to finance it, essentially all over the world. Earth. What purpose? In order to create demand for Russian gas. As a result, I undoubtedly and firmly believe there was a collusion. Old Europe with Russia, that's what I wrote about on the fourth day of the war. The essence of it is, in its core essence, to fundamentally and ultimately achieve global changes on a global scale. And significant global changes mean throwing the United States out of Europe, a potential collusion between Russia and Germany, because it financed all of this both in the West and in the East, with the goal of expelling the Americans from Europe, which would fundamentally change the politics of the entire planet. And if we look back, we need to remind ourselves of the key moments. First of all, Germany created an incredible demand for Russian gas by shutting down its nuclear energy. Russian gas turned out to be the most environmentally friendly according to the standards. The European Commission is the fuel on Earth. There was simply nothing absolutely cleaner and sustainable for green energy in Europe. First of all, secondly, it is important to understand that we need to recognize and acknowledge that the shutdown of nuclear energy had a systemic nature. Why? Because Putin has never significantly obtained more money than in the first 2 years of the war for gas. This indeed shows a very important and undoubtedly significant guarantee that Russia received historically in the context of international relations. Next, we need to understand how much the elites of Germany and Russia merged in order to fully. If we look not only at Germany but also at Austria, this policy is consistent in principle. This is Schröder, this is Merkel, this is Scholz, and it seems that this policy is coming to an end because it was a policy of madness. Next, if we look at another factor, it's the limitations, such as the restrictions related to the transportation of armored vehicles through Germany and other related issues. Let's indeed remember that the aid Ukraine received was bypassing Germany. Germany has completely destroyed its army. In short, out of 16 brigades during Merkel's time, only 4 are left. Next, by the end of the day, it surprisingly turned out that Merkel indeed asked Biden to eliminate American bases in Europe. I see it this way. War is, on one hand, a sword, and on the other hand, a shield. And the deal was that Russia, in this context, brandishes the sword, while Germany lowers the shield. If we look at what was happening, it was quite a situation. Then let's look at Germany's blocking of Ukraine's entry into NATO from a different angle. Let's indeed examine Germany's blocking of the development of infrastructure and defense on NATO's eastern flank from a different perspective. Let's indeed look at the numerous and various dozens of events that were held in such a way that the sovereignty of Central Europe was indeed in question. I want to say this. From this perspective, it turns out that this systemic war was prepared by Germany and Russia, fully sponsored by Germany. Germany created a coalition, bringing in other countries as partners, primarily France, which it simply corrupted, bought off, and allowed to live at its expense. In a way, on the other hand, Hungary, which was a voice, we need to remember that Putin made visits to Poland, for example, when he talked about the division of Ukraine. Tusk not only refused, but also made it clear, Just to think that Putin didn't have such negotiations with Orban, didn't have such conversations, indeed turns out to be the actual case. That the lack of support for Ukraine was indeed not accidental. For instance, as an illustration, today we learned that it is important to note that Germany only started helping Ukraine under significant pressure from the United States of America and its allies, including Washington. There wasn't such a desire. In short, Germany indeed acted like an ally. An ally of Russia? An ally of Russia, absolutely. And indeed, without a doubt, Germans are a good, peaceful, pacifist people. No one denies this. But the German elites pursued a policy that can't be excused today by saying that Merkel was pretending to be an idiot, claiming that she didn't know Putin was lying. Well, when didn't she know? Well, she didn't know until Georgia. She didn't know until Georgia. She didn't know until Crimea. It's just a consistent policy. I want to remind you, in 2014, following the annexation of Crimea by Russia, Germany faced a challenging geopolitical landscape. This event was pivotal, leading Germany to reconsider its foreign policy and strategic partnerships in light of the shifting dynamics within Europe. When Germany, in a strategic move, circumvented the sanctions and the firm DMG Mori, which built a plant that produces the machines that produce all these missiles that kill Ukrainians in Ukraine, I read the speech. We opened the factory on time, complying with sanctions, producing machines in Russia, and declined Almazante's offer. How great that we managed to open this factory in time, that doesn't bypass sanctions, that we can produce machines on Russian territory, that we didn't accept the offer from Almazante to take their premises to build our own, and we can continue to produce. In fact, attempts to shut down these machines have failed throughout the entire war, even though dozens of Ukrainian deputies and ministers sent letters. We can continue to produce. In fact, attempts to shut down these machines have failed throughout the entire war, even though dozens of Ukrainian deputies and ministers sent letters to the Bundestag. Well, not just there, but nothing worked, right? To the Bundestag? Well, not just that, it just didn't work out, right? This is indeed confirmation, and you could say that what we're seeing today is, in a way, I would say indeed the end of that policy in many respects, as it were. In fact, in essence, I indeed innocently believed that on February 28, 2022, I had already written that the old Europe's collusion with Russia aimed at ousting the United States had already collapsed. In fact, this collusion, it was still working at the time in the afternoon on that particular day when Scholz and Macron came here from Italy, yes, to the president. It was essentially working until in the year 2023, until Macron's significant speech in Bratislava, where he just pointed out that France wasn't involved in the matter, that Germany was actually to blame for everything, that France is ready to guarantee peace in Central Europe and so on, and guarantees, in fact, what we are dealing with, and we are dealing with an encroachment on the liquidation of the sovereignty of the countries of Central Europe, and with an encroachment on the expulsion of the United States from Europe. If it weren't for the second factor, the first factor, simply in today's world, there wouldn't be such countries as, in fact, Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, and Poland. I assert the thesis that all these countries owe gratitude to the Ukrainian soldier who saved the sovereignty of these countries. Be grateful to the Ukrainian soldier who saved the sovereignty of these countries,